Welcome to From the Ashes, the Dungeon Crawler Network podcast all about Ashes of Creation by Intrepid Studios. Bear witness to the rebirth of the MMORPG genre from the ashes of an industry that has left the gamers behind. I am Aggelos. My goodness, I just got tongue-tied with my own name. That's a problem. Well, I'm Aggelos, founder of DCN and From the Ashes, and I am here with the one, the only Stormzlord himself, my co-GM over at Hands of Fate. How are you doing? I can't hear you, so you must be muted.
I was talking really loud. Okay, so I'm doing great. How about you?
Well,
Let's use the mute button.
Yeah, I know. Mute does the thing. There's actually a reason why when I start shows and I say, okay, everyone be quiet, I don't actually say mute, because I've had issues in the past where I would mute a show, especially when we do them live, and my mute doesn't turn off, and I had to do this weird, like, oh, I gotta unplug my mic, I gotta replug it back into the soundboard, all that fun stuff. And here's my cat, because she's in every show. Hello, kitty. Hello. Okay. Goodbye, cat. Yeah, so cool. Good to have you on again, and we're gonna have a fun show, I believe. We also have Makinoji down there, one of the content creators over in Ashes of Creation. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. How about yourself?
Wonderful, wonderful. One of the specific reasons why I asked Mackie to come on the show, because he said I'd call him Mackie because I don't want to mess up his name, because I will totally do that by the end of the show. So one of the reasons why we brought Mackie on is he does a couple interesting things over on his channel, his Anthology Series channel. Do you want to tell us kind of like a little bit about what you're trying to do with the Anthology Series channel? I know I threw you on the spot, but that's what I did.
Oh my god. All right, so bear with me. I tend to ramble. So Anthology came about when Ashes of Creation was announced. Several people on the forum started to produce fan-based lore tales, stories for Ashes of Creation. It inspired me to share their stories through narration, through audio book style videos on YouTube. So I got together with these content creators, because they're content creators, amazing talents, and they gave me permission to use their stories in my videos, and it opened up for them a wider audience of the community, and it's been going pretty strong since.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the reasons why we brought on is because you did a narration, which we're actually going to embed into the video here, so you'll be able to hear it, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit later on. They did a narration and an audiobook version of the newest lore journal entry that was put up on the blog post. What is it? It's Dilia's, is that how they pronounce the dwarf name? I don't know. Her journal. So we're actually going to listen to that here in a little bit before we start our discussion. Now, this is actually going to be a little bit of a lore show, which if anyone knows me or follows any of the other shows that I do, such as Tales of Tamriel or our Saga of Leucemia show, Tavern Talk, I'm a big lore nut. I know I've spoken to Steven multiple times about his world creation and where he's going with lore, and some of the things that I find very important, because two of my favorite in lore universes are obviously Middle-earth, because J.R.R. Tolkien's amazing, and I actually just got done literally the other day listening to Return of the King, and I started all the way from the Silmarillion and did all of his audiobook catalog all the way through to the Return of the King. So I just finished that like yesterday. And of course, the Elder Scrolls series, because of how deep and rich their lore is. And so I'm like, I have a pretty high standard when it comes to in-game lore. I mean, even the Witcher series has some amazing world-building skills. And I know after speaking to Steven, he had mentioned that, you know, hey, he also has high expectations for lore because he shares love of many of the same universes that I do. So I have a lot of faith in what Steven's going to be able to come up with from a narrative perspective. And I can tell you personally, which we'll talk about again at the end of the show, that I really enjoyed the diary entry. It, as Mackie and I talked in pre-show, kind of felt a little bit like the Elder Scrolls Online, with how you would find journals of people and that have passed or that were in an area to kind of give you a little bit of lore about the world and the setting that they were in. So before we talk about the lore aspect and hear the audiobook version, they also released the fly-through video of the Dunheim dungeon that they played in the Alpha Zero test. Let's talk about that a little bit, guys. Stormzlord, how about you? What was your first thought when you see that fly-through video? Like, anything stick out to you? Did you like the design? Does it feel good?
I was awed, actually, being the Alpha Zero, that it's as neat and as cool as it looks, being this maybe not even the real art. It just looks phenomenal. The way they've set it up, I'm just flabbergasted. Seeing not only the play video they did a couple weeks ago, and then that view of the same dungeon looked tremendous.
Yeah, definitely the visual quality of the dungeon art that they've been doing and how quickly they've been putting together. Again, a lot of this could be coming from the Unreal side. Unreal has a lot of tools to allow you to build things quickly, and that actually is starting to become the more mainstay of the current indie genre, with tools such as Unity, with Unreal, and I believe even Amazon's Lumberyard provide you with a very rock-steady base to start with, as well as a lot in their asset store that freelance artists are able to create and throw in there that don't really have an art direction, but they can do some very generic base things, throw it into the store, and you can get a lot of art assets very, very quickly and get things out. I know that actually is a little bit of I don't want to say a failing point, but a stumbling block in the Ashes of Creation narrative, if you will, because of course a lot of the naysayers out in the general MMO community are like, is the game even going to come out? They don't have a lot of faith in indies. You know, I see a lot of comments on like YouTube videos of like, great, it's Unreal with some asset store stuff thrown in. You know what I mean? Those people are out there, and you're going to see that a lot in modern game development with anyone who uses one of at least these three products that I know of, because of how open they are. It makes it easy to get up and started very quickly. Mackie, what about you, sir?
I enjoyed the video. I like the art style of Bacon. Like you touched upon a while ago, seeing the alpha playthrough, I was really excited to see all the different aspects of the dungeon through the fly through video. I can't talk, but yeah, it was really beautiful, and I'm also curious if those are going to be the final assets or if it was just a mock-up.
You know, speaking of assets, it is something that is a big sticking point with me, because I like the assets that they're using. If you know anything about me, and anyone who's watching this show pretty much does, I like the more realistic art style. I like fantasy, but I like more realistic, that it sticks closer to Lord of the Rings, Elder Scrolls, or even The Witcher in design aspects, and leaving some of the crazy high fantasy stuff out of it, like floating pauldrons and things that you see in World of Warcraft nowadays are just things that don't really appeal to me as a person. Now, I know obviously there are people who like that kind of stuff. Good for you. And I'm not to say your aesthetic choices are wrong, because again, aesthetic choices are on an individual basis. I just prefer the more realistic approach, and so many of the armor styles they've shown, a lot of the weapon designs they've shown, everything, even and especially the Kickstarter videos that they showed us, and one of the reasons why I backed, showed the more realistic approach. if they would have showed me some outlandish, great swords 8 times bigger than my own body, I probably wouldn't have backed, going, this is another one of those, Asian super high fantasy kind of MMOs that just don't appeal to me on an aesthetic level. But I really hope they keep very true to this style, because that's what they've presented us thus far. That's what got us, that's where we all backed at. If they do a radical shift in art direction, I know that will pretty much upset me. Speaking of the art direction, we already know that Dunheim is the, this is going to bother me. I know I said I'm just a lore guy, but I forgot the name. What are the name of this subset of the Dwarven clan? Does anyone remember?
Dunsinko?
Dunsinko, yeah. Yeah, because then you had the Nuai or Nua that are the
Nikwa,
Nikwa that are the yeah. See, I'm all messed up at this point. I used to have it up on a page and I shut the page down, so that's my problem.
Yeah, the Dunsinko is the traditional. I can't even talk.
the Tolkien-esque dwarves.
Yes. And then the Nikwa were the islanders.
Yeah. So the actual design itself is very, very Tolkien inspired. And I know he wasn't the first to actually, write about these things, but sorry, anyone who doesn't like Tolkien, he pretty much made fantasy mainstream, right? Like, and a lot of his work was actually inspired by Norse lore and mythology and stuff like that, where dwarves are often described in this manner. So it definitely has that, Khazad-dûm feeling, from Lord of the Rings. And I enjoy that so much because I do love dwarves. They're like my favorite fantasy race. Even though I don't play them, I just love to know they're there and I want a dwarf sidekick. And I don't know why they're so scared of rails.
No kidding.
I mean, I guess it makes sense, because even in the Lord of the Rings with the Doran's Bridge is literally like this single file bridge with no railing over it, because they
don't have an OSHA.
Yeah,
Well,
it was a defense against intruders. I mean, that's
just push them off the edge.
Push them off the edge.
There you go.
Push them off the edge. Yep. So, from that perspective, I really like it. Now, the other thing that I know they talked about is these, I forget what they were called. Does anyone remember what their title was as a nameplate when they ran through the gameplay? Like Forgotten Armor or whatever. These hollow possessed armors. I'm actually curious if this was something that they put in just as something to fight, or if this is actually something more akin to the dwarves creating these artificial sentries, kind of like the Dwemer in ESO. They created a lot of robot sentries. They were more mechanical in this part. This is more mystical, but these golem-esque guardians are not uncommon in many worlds that involve, those Tolkien-esque dwarves creating these stone golems as sentries and protectors. Like, do you guys think this is going to be something that sticks around? I like it, and I hope it does.
Looking at the art, I think it will, because it's not just floating armor. Especially, you notice it more in the video from last couple of days, that Dunheim video. There is some mystical something floating below it and floating up toward the neck. It's not like, I'll just drop it or something. Here's the body here. Let's put an armor on it and fight it. They did some further thought of how it would look floating, not like it's walking.
Right. Yeah.
So it's a different build.
No, and it's there. I'm trying to remember. I think it was actually Dragon Age that kind of expanded upon that, where if you did the Dwarven storyline, you actually found out when you go into the deep roads that the golems, the only reason why they can move on their own is that the dwarves figured out a way of trapping the soul of somebody. Sometimes it was dwarves who sacrificed themselves into the bodies of the golems to move. That's why they were able to move on their own and not through like a control rod or anything. And I get this kind of has that similar feel to it, like the dwarves wrap the souls of a mortal and put it into an inanimate object. Other games have done it. It's not an uncommon trope.
Or, and again, this is where you start to put together. Well, Dunheim is in the near Dunthal, right? And it's in whichever kingdom. I can't remember they said it. Dunskell kingdom, right? So, and we'll talk about the Harbingers later. But when they come down and they get the corruption, what if that's what's left of those who are left in the city? What if they are? That's what's left. Who's there?
Yeah, that was my thought exactly.
Oh, that actually might be the vision I see in my head is if you play Guild Wars 2, the faux fire explosion that pretty much killed all the human defenders in Ascalon and turned them into ghost spirits that stuck around. The king essentially hit a doomsday button, released a magical explosion that just killed everybody and, trapped their spirits on Earth. And that would be fascinating. I like that. All right. So let's go ahead and we're going to move right on into that discussion. Since we kind of talked about the aesthetics of the Dunheim dungeon, so I'm really excited to see how this goes on. And of course, the video I have playing in the background right now is that video, so you can kind of imagine the Dwarven City here while we're talking about it. We're going to talk about the diary entry and some of the lore aspects and where we think the story is going, maybe even just like in a theme aspect or whatnot. And I think this will be a lot of fun to discuss. But before we do, we have a special treat for you. Makinoji's channel, the Anthology Series, they did a video just recently where they narrated the story for you. So you can actually sit down and listen to it without actually having to read. So if you don't actually like to read it, you can actually sit down and listen to someone else read it, which is always fun. I enjoy Audible. It's one of my favorite things. So that I sat down and I listened to it, and I actually contacted Mackie today after listening to it, going, hey, I got an idea. I'd like to use this on one of our shows, and we'll link it in the description below so you can actually go see the video itself without having to listen to all of our show to hear it again. So you'll be able to go to his channel and listen to this as well. So I guess that's it. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to play that for you now, and then we'll talk about the blog post directly after.
I was a child when they first appeared in the night sky. At first, there were 3 distinct lights, not quite the brightest in the sky, but they were bright enough. My mother told me that they were a sign from the gods, that the world was about to change. She had a sense of these types of things. A long line of women in my mother's family were oracles. Written on one of the many tablets in the great halls of King Grimlay is the story of my great-grandmother, the Royal Court's Regent Oracle, and how she foretold the rise of the Undying during the Great War. As the days grew to months, and months into years, the lights in the night sky grew in number. The priests in the temples began to refer to the lights as harbingers. Upon my graduation from the Master Stonecutters University, the lights numbered 16. Each passing month, the lights grew in brightness and size. It didn't take long for things to change in Dunheim. Families that I had grown up with began to move away from the city in the heart of the mountain. Travelers became less common, and temple services were filled every day with new converts seeking answers about the harbingers and what they meant. My mother wanted to leave the city as well, but my father wouldn't hear it. His auction house is what kept food on the table, and my brothers were both in the council guard. There was no way my father was going to be seen leaving the mountain. Honor and respect meant more than life itself, and my father had great pride in my brothers. Despite my mother's persistence to leave the city, we stayed. Life went on, as normal as it could. Day by day, the harbingers loomed overhead, eventually visible in the day's sky. A constant reminder of the future that would befall Vera. The greatest scribes of our time could not find any references to these phenomena in our ancient manuscripts. The high priests and oracles of all the major temples across the Dunzinkale kingdom were summoned to the great capital city, Dunthal. Days before the great council meeting was set to begin, King Brunir was stricken with a mysterious illness. My mother, who was a part of the delegation from Dunheim, wrote to me describing the king's haggard appearance. King Brunir stood to deliver his address to the delegates and collapsed at the start of the blessing ceremony. What was meant to be a meeting of the Great Council became a coronation ceremony. At the pronouncement of his death, King Brunir's eldest daughter, Vilja, became the queen of the Dunzinkale kingdom and protector of the dwarven people. My mother returned a different woman from Dunthal, with a sort of terror in her eyes. My father and she stayed in their room the entire night. The next morning was the first time I saw my father paralyzed with fear, as if he had seen a ghost. We began to pack immediately, planning to head to my uncle's mine inside the Aelin Empire. My brothers were told that our uncle Godin had died from a cave-in, and we were to attend his funeral. It was the only time my parents had told my brothers and me a lie. We spent the next day preparing for the 3-day journey. Once packed, we began to follow the road out of the mountain. The road into Dunheim was a long tunnel that begins at the great gates of the mountain. Several miles in length, it was the only entrance into the mountain. Normally, this passage was filled with traders and travelers from across Vera, but in the recent years, the world had changed, and with it, so had the lifeline into Dunheim. We were just an hour or so from the grand gates of the mountain when it happened. A loud boom reverberated across the ground and along the walls. It sounded as if the mountain itself had been split apart, followed several seconds later by a shaking that nearly caused the rams carrying our supplies to fall to the ground. I could see my father's mouth moving as he screamed at me, but I couldn't hear anything other than the loud ringing that filled my head. It was at this moment I felt something wet falling down my neck. I lifted my hand to feel what it was. I guess the shock of the whole thing prevented me from understanding what had just happened. My fingers were covered in blood. The shaking stopped almost as soon as it began. Behind the sight of my father calling to me, I saw my brothers struggling to lift the cart, which had collapsed. It was then that I noticed a hand from beneath the collapsed axle of the wooden cart. I immediately ran to the cart and began to push with all my might. The frame of the wooden vehicle collapsed into itself, revealing my mother's mangled body. She laid lifeless amidst the debris, as my brothers and I stood in shock. Our father frantically searched through my mother's bags while we watched for the slightest hint of movement. "Where is it?" my father asked, as he tore through books and clothing in the various bags that were thrown to the road when the cart collapsed. "Where's what?" I said to him, despite his complete attention devoted to his searching. My mind began to fill with memories of my mother. I saw both my brothers were already overcome with emotion, and just as despair began to take its grasp, I heard my father shout out, "Got it!" He rushed to my mother and, standing over her, recited a phrase I did not understand. A blinding flash of white light erupted from my father's hand. A curled and tangled wand fell from his hands. I then watched as my mother began coughing tightly in my father's arms. My brothers and I rushed to them both. "We need to get out of the mountain, Bronn," she said to my father as he held her. "Helgun, Thargud, quickly! Help me grab the food and supplies," he told my brothers. Looking at me, he asked, "Dilia, watch your mother while I help your brothers." As I sat with my mother, watching my father and brothers tie what supplies they could recover to the ram's saddle, she turned to me. "Dilia, there's something you must know," she said. "I love you more than life itself, my only daughter. You are the light of my life, and I would do anything to keep you safe." Her eyes began to flutter. But the darkness has come.
Alrighty, we are back. Hope you guys enjoyed that the narrated version of Dilia's diary. So guys, let's go to each person here and kind of give a little bit of a feeling of where this, how do I want to say this? Rewind that. Give me your first impression of this short little blog post. I know it was only fairly short overall. It only took a couple minutes to actually read the entire thing. But what was your first thoughts upon reading? Let's start with Mackie first.
All right. Upon reading this, I felt very saddened for this young woman to have read about her maybe final days, if not hours. It was for a very short story. It was very impactful.
Mm-hmm.
It I think we talked about this off screen.
Yeah.
It was the unknown, but it really resonated with me after I've read plenty of short stories in this community. This story was it was kind of like a story in ESO. You're just randomly questing and you pick up a note from a dead body. It's just finding a piece of this person's past, and what do you do with that? We have so many questions left.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you on a lot of those points, and I know when I get to my turn. Storms, what about you? What were your thoughts?
So, very interested. There's a lot under and through the surface through all of it, right? First started remembering names, trying to remember places, and put that all together. And as I was doing that, I didn't connect together what was happening until you got to the point where she felt blood on her neck, right? So again, very impactful, very good to go. I think this is a great way to begin, and I want more.
Definitely. I messaged Steven pretty much directly after reading it, saying how much I really enjoyed the first short story. One of the things that I really liked about it is this almost sense of impending doom the entire time. I reckoned it closest to a Lovecraftian kind of style of horror, and not Cthulhu, because I know I've said that many people tie Lovecraft in with Cthulhu because that tends to be a lot of what he does, but that's not the actual basis of the Lovecraftian horror genre. It's a fear of unknown. Like, Cthulhu is just this giant thing out in the water that no one really knows if it's there, but it's just this idea of doom that is out there. And that's kind of what you feel when you're first reading this. These signs in the sky, right? The harbingers that they call them. They are there and no one knows what they are. Of course, you have the doomsayers. We've seen this multiple times in our real world, right? 2012, the Mayan end of the world kind of thing. You have the doomsayers over there going, the Mayan calendar ended. This is them seeing the end of the world. And we've seen that in several apocalyptic movies as well, such as 2012. Such as Book of Eli. All these different movies that we've seen. These apocalyptic settings are always heralded by some strange event, some sign that people who have the knowledge to see it can, kind of foretell what is going to happen. The thing is, in this story, no one knows. All they know is there's these strange lights in the sky that have appeared, and they're starting to get more and more and more. People are scared. People, even going into this story, one thing that I really stuck with was the male father character being scared. And I know it didn't seem like he was scared, but one of the things people do when they're scared more than anything is try to grasp some sense of normalcy, right? Being able to go, nope, it's all fine. It's like a stage of denial, not wanting to leave the city despite this impending danger or this even perceived danger, whether he believed it was not really a threat or he was trying to maintain a sense of, nah, this isn't happening kind of deal. You can see the shift as the short story moves on when the harbingers actually do, I guess, start to fall, which you could see in the concept art, both on the blog post as well as in our podcast description. You'll see our thumbnail. We use that art as well because it was a very, very interesting piece of art that I really liked, that caused essentially this apocalypse and the mass migration off of Vera. I kind of want to talk about harbingers here for a second, because I know I've seen this kind of float around a little bit, both in our DCN community as well as the official Ashes community. The idea of, is this fantasy or is this sci-fi, right? Because pretty much once you step out into the idea of space, people automatically jump to sci-fi, when that's not necessarily the case, right? We've seen in many stories the idea of celestial bodies in a pure fantasy setting actually be representations of a divine setting, such as the planets in Elder Scrolls are actually not planets. They're spheres of infinite space that represent the gods, the Aedra that are there. You have the star of oh my goodness. Why am I drawing a blank on his name now? I just read it. Yarendil. You know, Yarendil is, you see a star in the sky, the elves see this star, and it's represented as a star, but if you actually read the Silmarillion, it's actually Yarendil on his ship Vindalot with a Silmaril on his brow. Like, so it's a person in space, essentially. And there's a few other aspects. I think in Elder Scrolls, again, Clavicus Vile trying to call down the moon. That's what Bar Dao is. The Ministry of Truth hovering over Vivec City is essentially a small comet that Clavicus Vile, one of the Daedra, sent towards Vivec City to destroy it. So having an idea of celestial bodies coming in doesn't necessarily scream sci-fi to me. What about you guys?
So, first thing on the blog post, actually, I saw the Dwarven city and that, but what drew my eye was the Harbinger in the ground.
Okay.
That, to me, that is where the Lovecraftian thought began. And not just because it's something that looks like an egg. I don't know if it is an egg, but if there's 16 of those, right, and it took that long to get there, to me that was a drive toward this is something's going to come along. And that is not necessarily science or fantasy. It could be either or, depending how it goes.
True. Very true. And I mean, even staring at the concept art now, you see this thing radiating an aura. And that red aura we've seen as a sign of corruption. That has kind of been their theming, if you will. The term theming is they've been sticking all of these corruption as red. You see that even during the Alpha Zero and PAX West footage, when you see Sorrow's Hunger, these red crystals growing out of this giant beast, a sign of corruption. So,
I didn't notice that. That's cool.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out.
Yeah, if you go back and look at it, the red crystals tend to herald this sign of corruption. When you saw the Birdmen that they showed, if you go back and look at the live footage or whatever that they did of PAX West during the game playthrough, you'll see the birds, but you'll see those red crystals lying around. right? I know Final Fantasy XIV actually also did this idea of Bahamut was hiding in the moon Dalamud, which actually turned out to be a contraption of the Alligans. But anyway, that's going into other lore. For anyone who's playing Final Fantasy XIV, there you go. You'll know what I'm talking about. I'm curious, like, if these things were some sort of alien species, if you will, if they're radiating corruption, or if it's one of a divine being who also sent them as a form of corruption. That also,
or a fallen angel, right? In that
yeah,
type way of looking at it,
yeah,
right? So it's going to corrupt, like wormwood is going to corrupt when it falls,
right? I mean, Diablo, you had the falling star in Diablo
yep,
3, which turned out to be
And that was-
Tyrael, but that kind of left a lingering sense, not necessarily corruption per se, but the magical aura around it drew in a lot of things. You were able to find it based on this aura. And if whatever was contained within these harbingers had a malicious aura to it, could be the spread of the corruption.
Oh yeah,
Mackie,
I've definitely.
what about you? What?
Harbingers. All right. So when I first read this, first thought went back to the ancient civilizations when comets or stars, shooting stars, and they had this whole religious aspect around it.
Mm-hmm.
One place my mind went to was, what if some other culture had a deity they prayed to, and this is the sign that they sent. This is their blessing, or this is their downfall. Or another aspect that I keep thinking of is, what if there's a war in the sky with the gods, and this is essentially a weapon that fell from heaven of sorts, and it's now on Earth. But how do we know if the corruption came from this stone, or if after the events that we're reading, the people then took this stone and made weapons, and that's how the corruption came to be?
Okay. No, it makes, I mean, the idea of the celestial beings, that definitely makes sense. I mean, my goodness, the entire Greek and Roman pantheon was based off celestial beings and bodies in the sky. That's why when you look at the Roman pantheon, they're named Mars and Venus and Jupiter and all these things. Because of course, Jupiter, Zeus was the godhead. Jupiter was also the largest planet that you could see. I mean, you could see Jupiter with the naked eye in most cases if you know where to look under the right conditions. So yeah, that's definitely not outside the realm of possibility. And that's why I never really jumped to the sci-fi aspect, because celestial beings being tied to divines was not something that, like you said, is very uncommon. But I do like the idea of the corruption, even if we know it as corruption now, but you're right. What if it was something that isn't in and of itself necessarily evil or negative? It's just, it is, right? And it's the aspects that you go into using it that would lead you to corruption and not. Maybe it's very overwhelming and now has kind of mutated a bit. That would be interesting to hear as well.
Right. And another point I want to touch on is people who've read the story and those who just heard the story. There's a point in that tale where they talk about this council being called and the king falling ill. How do we not know that's not tied to these harbingers all of a sudden falling? Was the king connected to these harbingers, or was there some sort of treachery behind this whole thing?
Interesting. That point, if you look at it, sorry,
No,
go. One of the things that I noted was the the father wanted to stay where he was, right, and was trying to do his thing. But it wasn't when the harbingers fell that he said, "Oh, we got to go." It's after his wife got back from the capital city. They went into their room for the night, and I'm sure they talked or something. And when he came out, then he's like, "This guy's gonna fall. We got to go now." So it's, to me, there's something that happened in the main city that did kill the father or the king. To me, that's what happened, but it may not be. And then when she told him what happened, he's like, yeah, it's all going to fall apart.
Huh. I like it. No, I definitely like that. That is interesting. I mean, anytime that you see any kind of royalty fall, there is that power vacuum, and maybe they saw the writing on the wall at that point and were like, nah, it's going to get bad here before it gets a lot better. And I'm curious about, like you said, with the harbingers as they started getting larger and looming in the sky, that maybe other people in the council started warning against this potential doom. Now, before we end off tonight, I definitely want to hear what your guys' thoughts are, especially if you enjoyed the story, what you first thought. Leave those in the comments below. But the one line that I love that really kind of set the tone is the very final line of the entire thing. But the darkness has come. That, I love it because it's almost like a grimdark type of setting. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, this isn't a happy ending kind of deal. And I'm really hoping that they tend to stick with that more dark aspect throughout the Ashes of Creation narrative, because that is something that is exciting. Because whenever you're doing an epic narrative, even if you want to play the hero or the bad guy, which you could do either at this point, if there's not some epic doom laying overhead, it doesn't feel as epic, if you will. So having this incredibly dark and almost hopeless situation is definitely very fascinating. And I'm curious to see, and I know I've spoken to Stephen about this multiple times, I would love to see during the process of development, or possibly even before launch, getting some novels or novella out that expand the story and the world of Vera a little bit more prior to launch. So that's something I'd like to see. Anyway, guys, thank you so much. This is going to pretty much end this episode of From the Ashes. I'm excited to get our first little bit of lore into this, and I really, this left me wanting more. It really did. I mean, it was tiny, but the theme felt good to me and something that had me incredibly excited. So I'm hoping they continue this trend and that we see more come in the near future. So before we let off, let's go ahead and say where people can find us. Let's start with Mackie first. Where can people find you?
All right, so you can find me on YouTube. We are the Anthology Series. You can also find us at ashenherald.com. We're all over YouTube. We're all over the Ashes of Creation forums. So if you guys are interested, please look us up.
Definitely awesome. And of course, there will be a link in the description of this podcast, linking directly to the narrative video that you heard about halfway through the show. So you can listen to it again as many times as you want at your own discretion, as well as be able to subscribe to the channel if you liked what they're doing. And I encourage you to do that. Definitely encourage more content creation to get out there and that people can see and know what Ashes of Creation is. Because I know I still talk to people constantly who've never heard of it. And I tend to get them to sign up pretty much right away. I can be very persuasive, and I have a lot of passion for the project. Obviously, doing a podcast about it pretty much 2 years before it's out. I mean, we were the first podcast that was out, and we're still doing weekly shows every single week. So we get pretty hyped about this, and I can talk about the game and where I'm hoping it goes. So yeah, I'm excited. Storms, what about you?
So Stormlords at twitter.com. You can catch us at Dungeon Crawler Network as well. And I'm starting to pimp my own game, but I won't give you the name of the studio yet, but we'll start that later. So eventually you'll be able to catch me at that link. But for now, you can catch us at ESO, or you can catch us within DCN.
Awesome. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Aggelos, AGGELOS_WOF, as well as on our Discord, both the official Ashes of Creation Discord, you'll see me there, and on our own community Discord, which I encourage you to go out and join. Even if you're not part of our guild, doesn't matter. Our community is open because of the show. We encourage people to hop into our Discord, chat, and get hyped for the game. You can get a link to that over on our website, dungeoncrawlernetwork.com, which is also where you can find links to all of our shows, everything we do, as well as all of our social media, such as our Facebook page, our YouTube, our Twitch channel, which we will be doing some live streams specifically for Ashes of Creation and Alpha Zero as the NDAs lift. So definitely check that out. And as part of the official content creator program, we will be doing giveaways and all that fun stuff as I throw a cat off of me. So definitely follow us over there at twitch.tv/dungeoncrawlernetwork. So when we go live with Ashes related stuff for chances to win all those fun little things, such as alpha beta keys and cosmetic rewards, all that fun stuff. Hello, kitty. Yeah, now she's eating my headset. And of course, if you're interested in joining the Ashes of Creation Guild for Dungeon Crawler Network, or Dungeon Crawler Network Ashes of Creation Guild, Hands of Fate, you can go over to our website, dungeoncrawlernetwork.com. There's a button on the front page that says Join the Guild. You can fill out your little application, and we will reach out to you to set up a little interview, tell you a little bit more about the guild, answer any questions you may have, and of course, then, you know, if you're a good fit, welcome you to our community. So we are going to be starting some events that will be earning some of our participation point value as Alpha 1 comes in, because that's one of the first publicly available alphas. So you'll be able to get in and help test with the guild and be earning a little bit of progression within our own guild hierarchy from there. And I encourage you to do that. Of course, you can also find us in our ESO guild, as well as some of us have been playing BDO recently, as well as Final Fantasy 14 on the Marbella server. So if you want to join us there, you can do that. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching. We hope you enjoyed this episode of From the Ashes, and we will see you next week.